1. So I'm a 25-year-old woman. I've worked in restaurants for all my technical work jobs. Spent some times at work with mom and dad while I was in middle school, if I was sick or school was out. Mostly filing paperwork or doing homework in life. Notice my trend is about 4 years each place. Worked at a small pizza place, fall 2015 to spring 2018. My first restaurant and serving job, fall 2016 to fall 2019. And my current job since fall 2019. The pandemic was rough being out of work, but being at a big corporate restaurant, think Bonefish Grill, Olive Garden, came with a lot of perks. Being paid a percentage of our normal wages depending on average hours before the shutdown had a lot of perks. Came back with no problem, but a lot of my co-workers didn't return after those 6 weeks. Learned different areas of the restaurant during the slow season and eventually became an hourly manager. Life was great. Being the kind of person I am, I like to be able to help wherever I'm needed. That's why I offered to learn every area of the restaurant. Then it became focused solely on where I was needed and when. Sometimes it would be the bar isn't getting drinks out for 20 minutes. We need you on the bar. To Expo is falling apart without you. To the host team needs help. And I would go to each section without question because I was making a good wage wherever I was. But slowly I started to realize how much of me was being taken advantage of. I had a conversation with my GM about staying on full-time as part of the management team, and he says we could discuss it during reviews. Can also be noted another hourly manager made more than I did after laws changed about minimum wage after the pandemic, and they never learned to bartend or cook. I said okay, and within a couple of weeks they told me they were retiring. I heard it would be another 18 months, but the restaurant was falling apart, so I get it. I considered leaving at that time, but with no plan other than to consider the first restaurant from 2016. So, I listened to a friend and manager who told me to wait for the new GM. They come in, and after a month or so I decide to voice my concerns about others making more money for less work, experience, and even tenure. They cut me off and say they've already looked into it and I'll be compensated. Good enough. A couple of months go by and I don't see a change in my pay. Note they started in August and the reviews are in October. During reviews they tell me that I'm getting the highest amount, tells another co-worker they're getting $2 and another $3. Don't know much about the rest of the hourly employees, but I plan to ask about it when I go in tomorrow. Because neither of those co-workers or I got what we were told, even after my raise. And the other person not getting a raise, I'm still making less. To wrap up, my husband told me about an opportunity to go right into management at a small coffee shop in town. I declined at the time because it was before our reviews, so my husband, who also has experience in restaurants, and the same one I work at now, decided to go for it. Turns out the owner wants both of us because he plans to open new locations, so I already have my notice written out. I'm just unsure of when I want to turn it in. Can also be noted that I do have 80 hours of paid time off that has carried over I can use, and I have already put in vacation time. I think I'm just ready to leave, but not ready for the conversation with my GM or the call from my DO, who wanted me to move into salary management, either at my location or to move within his region, which spans all over the US damn near, but never thought I was ready. I eventually told my GM with a 6-week notice. Asked him specifically not to tell a certain manager as they gossip to everyone in the building about everything. Also asked that I be able to tell the team in my own time, and to let me be the one to spread the word as I choose. Was going to let it known either this week or next. The next day, the manager pulls me aside and says, "What's this? I hear you're leaving us." Where'd you hear that?" "Oh, the GM." He literally could not be bothered. I was so upset after hearing that. Could also note that everyone else knows I'm leaving, but they don't know when, so I might not tell anyone at this point. I told my little circle of friends that I'll see outside the job, but everyone else can buzz off. 2. Started working at a casual dining restaurant 2 weeks ago. It was my first job in the service industry. I was not actually trained or anything, and I just had to learn as I went by observing my coworkers and looking stuff up online. The job was awful. The owner didn't know what she was doing. Everything was extremely disorganized. The other waiters would take their stress out on me. I was constantly given contradictory instructions. For example, your top priority should be taking food to the customers, and don't take the food to the customers. That's not your assigned task. I was expected to know things that I couldn't possibly know if I wasn't told. My manager and the owner expected me to simply read their minds. I was working over 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, and they did not pay extra hours even though most days you would work from 1 to 3 hours more than we are supposed to. I was struggling a lot, trying to find a way to improve and deal with the stress of this job while working with frankly shitty people. But I realized I loved being a waiter. I'm great with customers, I'm quick, I learn fast, and I've got a lot of stamina. During my last 2 shifts, I found a strategy to avoid getting overwhelmed that was working wonders. I basically just pretended I was having the time of my life and started to believe it. I was singing along to the music, smiling and joking around with the customers, being kind to my coworkers. I really thought I had it under control. Then my manager approaches me at the beginning of the Sunday night shift and says, "To be honest, we don't think you're cut out for this line of work. The service industry is very stressful, and you cannot handle this level of stress. I don't think you will ever be able to handle it. I wouldn't even try to work at a restaurant again if I were you. Some people just can't do this type of thing, and you're one of them." My sensitive and empathetic personality has always been something I don't particularly like. Her words really hurt me. I was just starting to turn things around and use what I consider my flaws as tools. Yes, I am sensitive and empathetic, and people's bad moods can get me down, and thus I started to put my best foot forward, connect with customers, and treat them with the kindness and empathy I would show a good friend. I decided to fight everyone's foul mood by being in such high spirits that it was essentially impossible for them not to smile. But my manager and the owner disliked me. They started to treat me very harshly during my last few shifts. I noticed, but was trying to pretend everything was all right. I finished up my shift as well as I could, made sure every customer I served that day left with a smile on their face, and said goodbye to my coworkers, and waited to get home to have a good cry. I'm devastated. I loved being a waiter despite the negative experiences at this restaurant. Before that shift, I was telling my friends that I believed perhaps this was the line of work for me, and it destroyed me to be told that actually I'm not cut out for this, and that I never will be. I don't know what to do. I feel lost. I'm afraid that my manager is right, and I'm just not strong enough for this line of work, even though I loved it. I don't want to go back to office work, which can be as stressful but without the benefit of interacting with customers face to face. Any advice? 3. About a year ago, I worked for a well-known 24-hour diner as a server. I worked the graveyard shift, so from about 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. This was in a part of a large city known to be pretty unsafe. So we got some interesting people, but this is definitely the craziest thing that happened during one of my shifts. It was about 2 in the morning. I was working with one other server, and our cook was in the back of the restaurant. This guy came in. He looked pretty worn out, but we got a lot of late-night workers who had just gotten off their shifts, so we didn't think much of it. My coworker sat him and took his order and brought his food with no problems. He ate quickly and went to the restroom after he finished. It was a decently busy night, and with only 2 of us in the front of the restaurant, we didn't notice how long he had been in the restroom until our cook walked in about 20 minutes later and saw him on the ground below a stall door. The cook called us over. We tried to wake the guy up by talking to him. Our cook even poked him with a broom, but he was unresponsive, so I thought he had actually died on the floor of our bathroom. The cook confirmed he was breathing after unlocking the stall door, so we just called the police and blocked off the bathroom. Don't judge. We were all college students, so had no idea what to do in this situation. The police and a few paramedics arrive a bit later. They wheeled in a stretcher and ran some tests on him in the bathroom. They told us he had overdosed and was alive, just unresponsive. They piled him on the stretcher and wheeled him out front, I'm not sure exactly what happened next, but my coworker and I heard sudden shouting out front, so we ran to the window and saw he had managed to escape the stretcher. He ran into a rock bed that lay in front of the whole restaurant and began throwing rocks at the cops and EMTs. All of a sudden, he turned and chucked a rock straight through our front window. It landed on a booth along with a bunch of glass. Thankfully, there was nobody in that area of our restaurant, but the few other customers inside had all ducked for cover and/or run into the back of the restaurant. The guy was tackled and arrested. We all had to give statements to the police. We swept up the glass, and the cook taped a kid's booster seat to the window to cover the gaping hole. 2 months later, when I finally quit, that booster seat was still awkwardly taped to the window, which should tell you how superb our management was. I was grateful to retire my taser I always kept in my work apron, but I do miss the chaos of serving sometimes. Gotta love food service. 4. So I was hired on Halloween as a server and bartender at a family-owned pool hall. It has been known as being a revolving door for employees for years, but I didn't understand why until I was hired. I started my training, and I'll admit, I was a bit rusty. It had been about 3 years since I had served or been behind the bar due to being a stay-at-home mom, so I expected a little bit of extra effort to become acceptable again. At the end of my first shift, my manager texted me saying that my trainer, who had been there for years, had nothing bad to say about me, and I felt relieved. I went through 3 more training shifts with the same results. A month goes by, and I am working the bar and floor, and try very hard to support both. My bartender is struggling with the load, so I help her as much as possible, and one table gets neglected. They come up to the bar and actually never complain, only that the owner notices that we never approached them. He says something to me, I apologize, and go on my way. A couple of days later, I had to drag a chair behind the bar because I could hardly walk. It was my 3rd shift in the row, and my body hurt so bad. Customers were asking me what happened to me because I couldn't walk without limping. Thankfully, the answer was that my body just wasn't used to working like that anymore. After all, I was sedentary for almost 3 years. There was also a misunderstanding over food that was the cook's and my own fault that day. A few days later, I receive a text that I've been let go. Apparently, a couple of coworkers complained that I was slow behind the bar, which, besides being news to me, could have been reconciled easily with a simple conversation. He had a problem with me sitting, which was a one-time occurrence. Beyond that, these 2 coworkers had been shit-talking literally everyone on staff, including the one who had trauma-shamed me, right to my face, and the owner himself. I had never received complaints from customers directly. In fact, a lot of people at this small-time bar had a ton of compliments to give me, one being that they'd never experienced an employee actually caring about them. The owner telling me constantly, since I started, that I was a beast and to keep it up, and that he had gotten a ton of compliments about me up to this point. In the end, I had a conversation with the owner where he offered me a hostess position that made no sense for the business. I initially accepted, but later declined because I wouldn't work somewhere I didn't feel wanted or welcome, and advised him to keep his eyes open for the bullies he hired before me. It would always be a revolving door with them around. Honestly, mom and pops are sometimes more toxic than corporations. It's beyond sad. The day I was fired, for I pulled a chair behind the bar because I could hardly walk, had a misunderstanding with food, but previously unmentioned was the fact that the place I work has 2 separate bars. It got so busy that I had to open the 2nd bar, and the place was huge, so walking back and forth was hard on my body. And my coworker that weekend kept disappearing for 20 to 30 minutes at a time, so her customers kept coming to me and complaining about her. I feel like I was scapegoated. 5. So I, a 25-year-old man, was asked to help out at another concept by the same owners because they'd been needing help, basically everywhere. I bartend, serve, and manage. Was kind of excited, but also very much questioning this move, since I'd been at the other restaurant for 2 years. Loved my coworkers, loved the bar program, was very happy. Then 3 days ago happened, Saturday night. One of the servers who manages with me, and I consider a good friend, was basically begging to leave, which was already an issue, because I said I'd close night before, so they can close then, since I double. Didn't hold up his word, and he always does it because he's irresponsible, and for some reason, doesn't realize his selfish actions hurt the people around him. Back to the main story. After they leave, one of the employees was beyond drunk before 7:30 p.m. Their shift started at 3. Bar knows better than to give shit out, but if the kitchen or someone else sneaks something in, that's a different story. They've been allowed to drink in the past, and I think it's a tradition started by the owner many moons ago that has been cancelled due to too many cooks crossing the line. Around 7, this employee comes out to the kitchen, screaming for a coworker, and I turn and ask why they're screaming, not even rude or aggressively, and immediately they snap, looking at me like, "What did you say?" and marches off to the hose stand, screaming at me to go to hell and to go fuck myself, but in Spanish. My first reaction was to go to the kitchen and ask how much they gave him, telling them not to give any more liquor to the staff and quit bringing it in. Then he comes back to the kitchen and keeps cursing me out and shouting at me, while I'm telling him to leave and go home. He said he will, but he's waiting on his food. I tell the kitchen not to give him anything because he's drunk. He's not paying for the food, and he wasn't a double, so why should he get any? Nah, they decide not to listen to me anyways, so he's there for longer. Drunk moron then decides to call the general manager for some reason. Anyone in their right mind would be able to tell he's drunk, so then me and the GM talk, and he says just let him out of there, basically, and that he'd call the chef, who had the day off, to talk about the kitchen's drinking. Here's where things get even better. The host tells me there's a guy dressed in all black outside, drunk, and creeping out the guests. I go outside, and it's one of the barbacks, drunk and passed out. I sent him home before any of this happened, and he stayed in that area at a bar across the street getting drunk. So I immediately carry him in through the back door so he's out of everyone's way, and no one can see him drunk. As I'm carrying him through the door, the drunk causing the issue starts recording me and says he'll show the GM so he can see how I'm helping the barback, but not him. Homie, you're screaming at me, threatening to fight me, and guests, possibly even fatally hurting them. You can walk your own self home. Finally he leaves, and I'm just beyond heated for what was basically my last shift with the majority of the staff I very much appreciated, and to some degree I thought I could rely on. I go to the kitchen and yell at the cooks either throw their liquor out or finish it, because it's not going to fly anymore, and the GM might come by to check their hiding spot. Rest of the night wasn't so bad, but damn did I stay heated for a long while. Sunday comes around, my last real day, and the GM finds out I cut the other server who helps manage, so now he's upset with me, and him asking why I sent him home when he was begging me to leave so he could go on a bender. Another coworker that night also admitted to drinking for some reason, getting themselves in trouble, and suspended, along with the drunk Saturday idiot. Barback got in trouble, but not really. They were honestly the least of the problems that night. I was originally very sad to be saying goodbye to my coworkers, but honestly, after my last weekend there, full-time, I'm happy to be leaving. I feel ridiculously let down and disrespected by some of my staff and people I somewhat felt I could rely on. The owner found out from the GM, and his response was, "I hope he learned his lesson." What fucking lesson? That people are assholes and drunks? I'm in no way saying I have never drank at work and don't enjoy alcohol. But if you can't hang and handle your liquor, don't drink, especially at work. Also, if this drunk idiot somehow manages to keep their job, and I'm ever helping out at that restaurant and they're there, it's beyond personal. It's on site if they even attempt to apologize. They don't remember anything. I'm gonna ask them if they still want to go outside, because that's the nonsense they were spouting then. Since all this happened as I was leaving, I'm kind of worried any potential pay increases have just been jeopardized. And while I'm happy to be away from the restaurant now, I hope I didn't lose an opportunity where I was really happy with the work I was doing. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Spinning Plates, episode 232. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. And before you go, please do poke the like button and share the video with friends and families. If you'd like to get the videos a little bit early, support me on my Patreon, which is linked in the description. Click the link, takes you right to it, select how much you want to support with. You can also find a link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to tip your narrator. If you want to, you don't have to, but I do appreciate it. You can do that by hitting the little heart with a $sign in the middle. Right, I don't think there's any other business today. I don't believe there's any shout-outs until next year. I could be wrong, I don't know. Nope, just checked. It's all good. Okay, so let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. Today's question is, are you hoping for snow this year? A lot of people like snow around about Christmas time. Personally, I'm definitely hoping no, even though the weather says we've got some bad weather coming in, because I'm having to cycle up and down to the hospital for my psoriasis treatments 3 times a week. So please, no snow until that's over. Snow as much as you like afterward. I won't care at that point. Why don't you let me know what you think in a comment below. Oh, also, I'm planning to do, if all goes according to plan, if all goes well, I'm planning to do a New Year's stream tomorrow night. So I'll start at 11 PM UK time, and we'll run for at least 2 hours. We'll see how well things are going. And I'll see you in the new year with you folks. Okay, and with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.